All right, hello everybody. We welcome you and thank you to the third Lunch and Learn of this series. And today's topic is neighborhood violence. And it wouldn't be right if we didn't teach you how to keep your personal safety. And that's important for all of us, no matter what. But right now, it gives me great pleasure to introduce Sergeant Cheatham from the Columbus Police Department, and he's going to teach us how to stay safe. Thank you.
Gail, do I need to speak into the mic the whole time, or does it matter?
Yes.
I do. Okay. Good morning, everybody. I'm Sergeant Chris Cheatham. I'm with the Columbus Division of Police, assigned at the Training Academy. I am the Defensive Tactics Sergeant, and I've been with the division for almost 23 years. It'll be 23 years in December, and I spent my first 20 years in patrol. The whole time I was in the Franklinton area on first shift and third shift, and then I got an assignment at the academy about 2 years ago. I'd like for my two partners here to introduce themselves as well.
Good morning. I'm Officer Pat Veer. I work under Sergeant Cheatham at the Police Academy as a full-time defensive tactics instructor. I've been on for about 11 years, and when I worked patrol, it was the north side on Zone 1, and so we're happy to be here, and thank you for having us.
I'm Officer Dave Freetag. I've been on for 15 years, and I'm still assigned to patrol. I'm out here temporarily with defensive tactics, and this is actually the area I work, here on 12th Precinct and just north of here on 7, so I've worked this my whole career.
I told you that we run the Defensive Tactics Unit with Columbus Police. A few things what we do. Every year in the fall, every member of the Division of Police from the recruit who just graduated from the academy to the chief of police comes through 8 hours of our training. We give them updates on use of force, the law, policy changes. We spend about an hour and a half with them in a classroom, and then the rest of the time is either in the mat room or doing scenarios, just to kind of prepare them. It's a CALEA standard, which is a national police accreditation standard. It's also an OPATA standard, so we meet those standards every year by training every member of the division. We run the PIT program, and that's where we teach officers to pit a car and make it turn when they refuse to stop for us. You've probably seen those tactics. We do specialized training. For example, these two will run a ground defense course for officers who sign up for that, an advanced ground defense course or an advanced boxing course. We're in charge of the recruit defensive tactics program, so when our recruit classes are in, which one's in right now, we take them through all 77 hours of their training for that. We also have some outside agencies that come in and see us, and we give them our training. We kind of show them what we do. We're in charge of the TASER with the Columbus Division of Police and all TASER policies and equipment, and we completely train everybody in the TASER. We develop lesson plans and scenarios for defensive tactics. We do remedial training for officers who may have a questionable use of force on the street. Sometimes their chain of command will opt to send them to us and retrain them. And we just finished training. It was a whole year's worth of training, the entire division, on how to respond to an active shooter. That was a very good training, I think. We did a lot of it out at DSW on East Fifth Avenue, and it was very intense and involved, and I think, Officer Commode, would you agree it was good stuff, right? Yeah, I think we're much better prepared now for an active shooter in the city of Columbus, at least on the police end, we are. So with that, usually I work off of a PowerPoint, but I don't have one available today, so I took some notes here. But a few things that I like to always talk about, I've got a list of them here, and I'll start with action beats reaction. Now, how does that apply to you? Well, if you are walking down the street and a person approaches you and has bad ideas, bad intent, you need to understand that it takes a human being a third of a second to see a threat, react to the threat, and respond to the threat. So if that person blades their body and makes a fist, it's going to take you a third of a second to see that fist coming. So in other words, that fist is going to hit you before you can react. So if the fist makes contact with your face, now not only do you have reaction time to deal with, but you have what? Anybody? Recovery time. Now you have to recover and engage in the confrontation. I'll ask, have any of you ever had a situation that made you feel uneasy, or have you ever been attacked? If it's too personal, obviously don't bring it up, but have you ever had anything that's made you feel like this isn't a good situation for me that you'd like to share? Yes, ma'am.
Share?
Yes, I mean, you don't have to if you don't want to, but if you care to, that's fine.
I'm a retired social worker, and I had a threat. I worked in Wyland Park, and I was actually abducted from Wyland Park for 3 months. So my reaction time, obviously, was not nearly as quick as it needed to be.
Can you share how they pulled off the abduction? How did they get you to do this?
I don't. I'm sorry.
Okay. Anybody else? Thank you. Anybody else? Okay. All right, so back to action versus reaction again. I would like to prove this point, this third of a second reaction time that I was talking about, I would like to ask for 3 volunteers. I have 1. If you don't raise your hand, I'm going to choose you randomly. 2. Come on up. 3. While everybody's still in the room, I want to show you, these are training guns. They're blue, okay? They're painted blue. We paint these blue when we remove the firing pins, okay? Meaning if a bullet were loaded into the chamber, it would not fire, okay? So it's a safe gun. But I'll show you that there's nothing in there, okay? It's completely blank. Would you guys see that? It's completely empty. See that? You pull the trigger, nothing will happen, okay? Okay, what we're going to do, Dave, could you take 2 of them out? Sure. Out of earshot? Sure. Leave the third one here. Pat, we'll just have, I'll talk you through it, and you be the police officer. You be the robber, yeah, okay. All right, so you take that, you can pull the trigger a few times, just point at the floor, pull the trigger, just so you know, okay. All right, here's a scenario. If you were to stand right here, okay, and face, actually no, you're the police. You stand and face him, he's gonna turn and face away, okay? You are a police officer responding to a robbery in progress at a bank. Okay, do me a favor, take about 2 steps back, okay? You're outside the bank. You just got out of your cruiser. You're walking up to the bank, okay? This is the bad guy walking out of the bank. He's leaving the bank as you're walking up. You're out in the open. You surprise each other, okay? You're the good person, bad person, all right? I want you to do what a police officer should do in this situation, okay? Just do what a police officer should do, all right? The scenario will begin when I snap my fingers.
No thinking time, okay.
Right, okay? We're talking about third of a second reaction time here, okay? So you do what a police officer should do in this situation. Ready? Ready?
I just had a thought of turning that over to you.
Here we go.
Sir, can you put your gun down?
Dave, want to bring the next one up? Where did he go? Yeah. All right, you can sit down. Thank you. Thank you. Okay. You could stand right over here, please. Just pull the trigger a few times. Just get familiar with it. Okay. All right. Pat, you're there. Go ahead and face Officer Veer here, please. All right, ma'am. What's your name? Kate. Okay, Kate. You are a police officer responding to a robbery in progress at a bank. Okay. You're walking up to the bank. This is the door to the bank. Pat's walked out of the bank. You're outside in the wide open. You kind of surprise each other. Okay. I want you to do what a police officer should do in this situation. He's the bank robber. You're the police officer.
Okay.
You both have guns in your hand. Okay. The scenario will begin when I snap my fingers.
Okay.
You ready?
Freeze!
Okay, good. Yeah.
Okay, I'm giving you instructions.
Good, pull the trigger a couple times, just so you're familiar with it, okay? All right. What's your name again? I'm sorry. Sid. Okay, Sid. Sid, you're a police officer responding to a robbery in progress at a bank, okay? You're outside, you're walking up to the bank. The bank robber is Officer Veer. He's just exited the bank. Cop, robber, okay? I want you to do what a police officer should do in this situation, all right? You both have guns in your hand, okay? Do what a police officer should do in this situation. The scenario will begin when I snap my fingers. You ready?
Sir?
Okay. That's it. Okay, so what did you learn from this little drill? Anything? Go ahead.
You should have ducked.
Should have ducked.
You know.
Okay. Anything else? Anybody else?
Doesn't take much time.
Okay. It doesn't take much time, does it? Did he do that quickly? Yeah. As quick as he probably could have? I think he could have done a little quicker, to be honest with you, okay? He could have shot right away, couldn't he? He kind of waited. Who was my first volunteer who went? Okay. You didn't shoot at all, did you? No. Can you tell me why not?
Because I just would never do that.
Okay. My second volunteer, you shot, didn't you? Why did you shoot?
Because he pointed a gun at me.
Okay. Did you shoot before he did or after he did?
I think after he did.
After he did. Okay. And who's my third volunteer? Okay. What about you? You shot. Why did you shoot?
He aimed a gun at me.
Okay. Aimed the gun at you. Did you shoot before he did or after he did?
At best concurrently, but I sometimes
Okay.
after.
All right. So let me ask you: is concurrently good in a gunfight? No, it's not. That's why you need to understand that when somebody has the drop on you, whether it be with a gun or within arm's reach where they've bladed their body and given you some clues that they're going to strike, if they want to strike you, they're going to strike you and you're not going to be able to stop it. What you see in the movies where people duck and they block and all that, that's stuff that rarely happens unless you've got a lot of training under your belt, okay, that you're able to react that quickly to seeing a threat, okay? So it's important when you're talking to somebody, first and foremost, when that hair stands up on the back of your neck, you need to recognize that, okay? You need to trust that feeling, okay? Because there's a reason why that's there, okay? That's telling you that things aren't good, okay? And then from there, you need to expect the unexpected, not be caught off guard, because you need to realize that if somebody's going to strike you, you're not going to be able to stop it. It's going to happen, okay? So how do I avoid those situations, okay? First off, most basically, could you guys stand up here, please? Let's show them reactionary gap. Okay, this is something we teach our police officers. You may wonder why our police officers always seem to stand at this distance when they talk to people. Rarely do you see officers talk to citizens this close. Would you agree with that? Yes. We always stand back a little ways, okay? That's why. Okay, that's a reactionary gap. If that person were to decide to attack, we at least have a little bit of time to recognize what's coming and react to it. We're putting time on our side. So typically we say an arm's length plus one step back. That's basically what we try to do, okay, for reactionary gap. Same thing's true for you. If a stranger approaches you, you get that feeling on the back of your neck, try to back away. Don't let that person crowd you, okay? Trust that instinct that you have that things aren't good. Mindset. Don't be caught off guard by an attack. Okay, if you're walking by yourself downtown, it doesn't even really have to be after dark. If you're walking, look around, scan. You know, how often do you see people walking down the sidewalk here in this city like this? Not paying a bit of attention, right? Do you think that person's a victim waiting to happen? Absolutely, because they're not aware of their surroundings. Okay, so you got to constantly be looking for threats, okay? And if somebody approaches you and starts a conversation, okay, whether it be asking for money or just somebody that wouldn't normally approach you, try to maintain that reactionary gap. Try to make it harder on them. Okay, now, if they become more aggressive, then it's time to make a scene. Okay, start making a scene. The last thing they want is to draw attention to what they're doing, right? So be as loud as you can be, all right? Be as violent as you can be if they attack, okay? Don't allow yourself to become prey to this predator that's after you. Does it make sense to everybody? Okay. Environmental awareness. How many of you in the course of your job go to strange houses? Anybody? When I say strange houses, I mean people you don't know or you're doing business. Okay, good. When you park your car, do you park right in front of the house? Typically? I'm sorry?
I do not have a car, so I'm always walking or biking or taking the bus to the location.
Okay. Are you by yourself?
When I meet with the rest of my team, yes.
What do you do, if you don't mind me asking?
I'm the program manager for the Safe Routes to School program, so we encourage walking and biking. And I do door-to-door outreach with the CARE Coalition. So tomorrow we'll be visiting the sites of the most recent homicide in Linden. I'll be meeting the team there by biking and taking them.
Okay. Do you typically go indoors? Do you go inside the house?
We do not.
You never go inside the residence?
We do not.
Okay. You ever have issues with dogs?
Yes.
Okay. How do you handle those?
We advise everyone who's participating in the outreach that you only visit homes that you're comfortable. So most of them are afraid of dogs. So I'm the only one who goes to those homes and someone waits on the sidewalk nearby.
Do you have any mace or anything in case a dog attacks? Do you equip yourself with anything?
Leg.
You mean you're going to outrun the dog?
No, kick it.
Kick the dog. Have you ever kicked one?
I have had to do that, yes.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you. Anybody else? Anybody else go into homes? Okay. Any experiences where you've been in a home and haven't felt safe? Or do you always feel safe?
Time.
Okay. You care to share that?
Bicycle group, or a motorcycle gang that I didn't know about. And they all came in with these chains around their necks and everything, and I'm going, oh my God. But they turned out to be okay.
Well, when you're in the mindset to expect the unexpected, okay, when you go into a home and there's a person sitting there and there's a beer bottle on the table, you know, it might not be a bad idea to ask them to move that beer bottle over, okay? Because you got to think to yourself, what's a potential weapon here? If this person were to decide to come after me, what could they use as a weapon? So you got to think about that. You know, be looking for what? Looking for kitchen knives that might be out, or even a gun. A gun might be laying out somewhere, you know. Just don't be caught off guard by those things. You know, think a little bit outside the box of what you're used to thinking to keep yourself safe. Does that make sense? Right. That's what Pat said, yeah. Okay. Have you ever thought about your verbal judo skills? Verbal judo, that's a term we use in the police in police work. How do you talk to people? How do you de-escalate somebody? What are you going to do if somebody comes up to you forcefully, trying to coerce you into doing something? How are you going to talk to that person? How are you going to bring them down if they're angry? Have you thought about that? What are you going to say to them? It's a good time to kind of humanize yourself, okay? Tell them, hey, you know, I got a family at home or whatever, but try to make yourself a person to them and not just an object, okay? So that's something to think about if you haven't thought about that. How many of you make a point of traveling in pairs when you can? I kind of touched on this earlier with that young lady. You do. Sir, can you tell me what you do?
I work for Focus High School, and I go in, if a student is drunk or missing school, we go and knock on the door and see where they're at.
Okay. But you always try to go in pairs?
Always.
Yeah. Anybody in the course of their job not go in pairs but wish you could or think you should? Okay. One thing that we like to do with classes like this typically when you come to the academy is teach you things in our boxing room, how to make a fist. We have a boxing facility for that. We also talk about some ground defense. But if I could get my instructors here to just stand up and show you a couple basic ways of making a fist, protecting yourself, squaring, you know, blading your body and stuff like that. So Pat, if you could stand up there for me. Sure. First of all, blading your body. Now this is something that will show you that you can do if somebody is approaching you that you feel uncomfortable about. And it's also something that you should look for in a person, okay? If somebody's getting ready to strike you, all right, Pat, you be the assailant with Dave, okay? Most people are right-handed, okay? Pat's right-handed. If Pat really wants to hit a person, before he strikes, he's going to more than likely do this. He stepped offline, he bladed his body, he made his fist, okay? Those are all indications that something's about to happen. Now, he could give a jab. Go ahead and show a quick jab. That could be something that he could do, okay? But even with that, he's moving his feet, he's blading his body to get a little more power behind the jab, okay? So you want to pay attention to those danger cues, all right? If somebody does that, the threat may be imminent, okay? As far as protecting yourself, how you make a fist. Pat, go ahead and face everybody if you would. The way we tell our brand new recruits very first day of defensive tactics training, how do you make a fist? Because this is important, okay? You want to pretend like you have a roll of dimes in your hand. You want to wrap your fingers around the dimes, cap your thumb off at the end. We don't want the thumb sticking out. We don't want the thumb inside the fingers. Okay, both of those are broken thumbs waiting to happen, okay, which we see every recruit class. We don't see the broken thumbs, but we see recruits making fists like that on day one, okay? They're just untrained fighters. They've never been taught the right way to do it. We teach 4 basic punches at the academy, okay? The first one I talked about earlier is the jab. For this one, you want to blade your body just a little bit, and you want to, with a jab, you want to pretend like, anybody ever smack a towel out, a wet towel? That's what a jab almost simulates. It's a stunning punch, okay? It's supposed to go out and come back as quickly as it went out, okay? When you throw a jab, you want to turn the fist over and strike with the first 2 knuckles, all right? You never want to strike anybody with this outside knuckle. That's a broken hand, okay? So you got to emphasize the first 2 knuckles on the fist. That's how you throw a jab. The second punch that we teach is the cross. The cross is a power punch. It's a more powerful punch than the jab, okay? And that's what Pat just simulated a minute ago. But with that one, you're going to blade your body a little bit. You're going to kind of push off the back foot. You're going to use your hips for power, and you're going to turn that fist over. You're constantly going to hear us telling our recruits when they're in the boxing ring, squash the bug, squash the bug. What that means is you want to turn that back foot. You get all your power from the hip rotation, okay? It's very similar to a baseball player, where they get their power, a golfer. Okay, that's how you get power in a punch. So you have the jab. Go ahead and show the jab, Pat. Then you have the cross. There's the cross. So the third punch that we show, it's a combination of punches actually kind of, but we just show uppercut, uppercut, okay? And with this one, this is when you're in close to somebody. Your target area is probably going to be mid-range on the chest, but you're going to lower your level, and then you're going to use your legs again for power, but you're going to come up through the person. Uppercut, uppercut. And then finally there's hook, hook, okay? And then hook, hook comes from the side. You want your elbow to follow your fist, okay? These are just 4 basic punches that we teach. If you were at our academy, we'd actually have you doing that in our mat room. We do offer that if you want to come out. But if you're going to defend yourself, you know, you're going to have to know how to do it. If you've never had any training, you don't just start to fight with somebody, okay? But the bottom line is, you know, if you can land one punch just to get them distracted and then take off running, isn't that the answer? Somebody's attacking you. You're not going to want to stand there and go toe-to-toe with somebody and fight with them. So distraction's the key. I've talked about distraction in a lot of ways, making a lot of noise, okay? Hitting somebody and getting away, all right? Traveling in pairs, all right? Making some sort of a diversion to what they're trying to do to get them off course a little bit. So we also have some things that we teach at the academy from the ground, if somebody's to actually get you onto the ground, but I don't know how feasible that would be in here today. But you know, if you get knocked down, you got to think about how you're going to fall. Okay, where do you want to fall? Most people, a natural instinct when they fall is to put their hands out, right? What does that lead to usually? Broken wrist and broken hands, okay? So when you do fall, it's always a good idea to try to land on the forearms and not your hands. Now, it's a lot easier said than done because, like I said, our natural reaction is to go like this. But when you post up like that, you end up with a broken hand, broken wrist, dislocated elbow. I've seen all of them, okay? So you want to either, when you're falling forward, try to land on your forearms. When you're falling back, same thing, land on the forearms. Lay those forearms out there, but don't post up with the hands, okay? Try to avoid landing on your kneecaps if you can, all right? If you're going to the side, we practice this with our recruits. If you get pushed down from the side, we talk about them calf, thigh, lat. Hit your calf, then your thigh, then your lat, okay? Instead of landing on your shoulder or posting up with the arm to hurt your arm. But again, create a diversion, strike, run away as fast as you can, okay? Call the police. Try to, as quickly as you can, remember what this suspect looked like so you can give a good detailed account. We just did a scenario with our recruits. They're what are they, week 4 now? Last week, recruits were in the classroom. They were here listening to a lecture from one of the instructors. They had one of us enter the back of the classroom, and we had a blank gun. Okay, as they're sitting in the classroom, this person walked through the room, pow, 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 scared the crap out of them. Okay, walked in one door, walked out the other door. When he left, what do you think the instructor did? ask for a description. You think we got the same description from everybody? No. No, that's something you have to train yourself to do. All right, you have to train yourself to pick up on little things, little clues like that on somebody, because otherwise our minds don't quite work that way, do they? We can't always remember things exactly the way they happen, especially when it's a critical incident or a dangerous situation. So, kind of think about that. So to recap what we've talked about so far, you want to be aware of your surroundings, okay? You want to travel in pairs if you can. You want to look for danger cues. You want to maintain a reactionary gap at all costs. Action beats reaction. You have to recognize that, okay? That if somebody wants to hurt you, if you don't have the right reaction time in your favor, it's going to happen. So I think now I'll open it up to questions. Anybody? Yes, ma'am.
Before I mentioned not having a vehicle, you were asking about where people park. Could you finish what you were going to say? I'm sorry.
Well, would you agree that you never quite know the mindset of the person you're going to visit? Am I right? Okay, so a suggestion I would have would be not to park exactly in front of the house, okay? Because who knows what their intent is when you get there. By parking a little bit further away, and I'm not talking blocks and blocks and blocks, I'm talking 3 or 4 houses away. At least that gives you a chance as you're walking up to scan the area a little bit more. Put reaction time in your favor because you don't know what you're walking into. Another thing you can do, I don't know if anybody ever told you this when you're walking in a neighborhood to do this with your keys? Okay, we talked about how you make a fist, but you can just do this with this very unintrusive, all right? It's just something that you can do, but it would help you out a little bit in case you did have to land a jab on somebody or hit somebody quickly. Again, we don't want to label people and just think that everybody's bad, but then at the same time, you don't want to be caught off guard either. So you got to kind of have that tactical mindset that, hey, I'm not going to be a victim out here. I'm going to react if I need to. Anybody else? Yes, sir.
Can you show the bank robber situation the way you guys do it or recommend doing it?
The way we recommend for our police officers? Yeah, I mean, I can tell you, we can show you or I can tell you, but basically action beats reaction. That's a justified shooting. Okay? Okay, sure. Actually, we can talk about that for a minute. Okay. Bank robber, officer, okay? Bank robber, officer. Scenario begin when I snap my fingers.
Drop the gun, drop the gun.
Does everybody agree with that? That's good. Anybody disagree with that action? Okay, go ahead.
I can't put it into words, but that is my reaction. Because it's a reaction, I don't have words right now, I'm sorry.
Okay. Let's do it again. You ready?
You're fast.
Mm-hmm. Ready? On the snap of fingers. Ready?
Drop the gun, drop the gun.
One shot. Okay. Yes, sir.
How does that scenario change when they're just as far away, but the officer has a gun and the suspect has something that doesn't project, like a knife or something?
That's different, okay? That's different. There's a lot of different factors that play into this, okay? But he has a weapon now, okay? The snare, we'll say that marker is a knife. Okay, you ready?
Drop the knife, drop the knife, drop the knife, drop the knife. Drop it
down. I either at this point, as a bad guy, I either choose to drop and comply, run, or attack. That's all I got. So if I would attack him at this point, I close the distance, he'd be forced to shoot me at this point.
So what I'm curious about is, as he's turning, he drops the gun. He sees that you're armed, and he says, yeah, I dropped the gun.
Okay.
Is there enough time to react not to shoot or no?
Well, we know that action beats reaction, okay? We don't know his intent, okay? Court case Graham versus Connor says that it's not incumbent upon a police officer to know the suspect's intent, okay? Now, and I'm gonna get back to you here in a minute, ma'am. Yes. What about this scenario? You think that's possible? Yeah, who says no?
Say possible, but unlikely.
It's happened to me.
It's happened to Officer Freitag.
Happened to me on the street.
We have an officer who,
Right here, he was running from me, I'm behind him, he drew his gun and started going in. So it's very possible.
so you hear about a police officer shooting a suspect in the back. Let me do one more thing here. All right. Gun draw, yep. All right, this is a scenario that happens sometimes too. All right, on the snap of the finger. Ready?
Drop the gun.
Does that make sense? See how that happens sometimes? The person's in movement, but we don't know what they're trying to do. We don't know their intent. All we know is that gun, that he can get that gun up and fire the gun as quickly or quicker than what we can. And we've all agreed already that a tie is not good in a gunfight. Would you agree with that? Would you like to see any more examples, ma'am? Okay. I mean, we're more than happy to. Any other?
So what you're saying, in other words, when a suspect has a gun, it's the officer's position to shoot and ask questions later. It's no second thought.
No, that's not what we're saying at all, okay? First of all, you got to understand that in this scenario, and this is very key to this scenario, is there anything in between the suspect and the officer? Right. Does the officer have any cover at all? No. Does this situation change if he's behind cover? Cover meaning something that would stop a bullet. Yes. This scenario, this bank robbery scenario that we gave you is a very real life scenario. Would you agree with that this could happen, okay? But we did it in a way to show you that when you're out in the open like this, without any other variables, action beats reaction, okay? And it's not just for a police officer, okay, going against a citizen, but it's also for you as well to know that when you have no other options and you're in the open like this. Now, as a citizen walking down the street, would you agree that it'd be better if somebody were to attack you to get on the other side of the car from them? No?
I just want to know, in the examples you showed here, if a robber's coming out, there's no way to give him no chance at all. If you see the pistol, it's to shoot now. That's what we assimilate. Shoot now, don't any type of move. You come out and you approach him, you just start shooting to protect the best, to get the threat, salvage threat now.
Under this set of circumstances with no cover, yes. Yes, that's how an officer would save their life, yes.
We hear so many stereotypes, you're supposed to pronounce that you're a police officer and all that kind of.
We can if we have time and we have cover on our side, but we don't always have that option. Okay, yes?
It's just the fact, my life is just important as his life.
Exactly.
Right.
Exactly. So, and there's been some bad things that have happened out of that, but you know, it's a dangerous job, okay? And you have to, once you understand this concept, I think, you know, Hollywood kind of spins things a lot of ways, and you think you have time, you know, you think you can shoot somebody in the leg instead of shooting them center mass, but that's not an option either, because Force Science is an institute that has studied police shootings and police use of force, and they've proven over and over and over again that when you're involved in a critical incident, that you're, first of all, you lose control of your fine motor skills. You just have your gross motor skills. So you don't have the ability to lock in on the arm or on the leg, okay? Your best chance of stopping this person is center mass, aiming center mass. So basically, first of all, the majority of police shootings, like 87% of police shootings happen within 6 feet. Did you guys know that? Within 6 feet of the suspect. They're close, okay? Also, a human being can fire 6 rounds in a second. 6 rounds in 1 second, which means they can fire 2 rounds in a third of a second. And what did we tell you earlier? How long does it take for a human being to react to a threat? A third of a second, right? So in that third of a second time, it's been proven by Force Science and other institutions that in a third of a second, a person can fire 2 rounds. Okay? That's something that every police officer, every citizen really should know. Okay? That's the danger that you're in. Okay? Because action beats reaction. Does that make sense? Okay. Anybody else?
Right here.
Yes, sir.
One other scenario-related question. It just occurred to me that in your initial role play. The person with the gun over here is facing away from the officer. Do you ever have a problem where that person simply doesn't know that the person behind him is a police officer? Because his thing, he said, drop your gun, he didn't stop to say police, and that would take a second or so anyways, so.
Well, do we have the luxury? I mean, would you agree, Dave, turn and face away. Would you agree that based on what we've talked about so far, okay, that if he says police officer, in that time period, Dave could shoot him?
Theoretically, yes.
Theoretically.
Is, unfortunately, in this day and age, there's a lot of people out there who think the answer to guns is more guns, and what happens if the guy you're looking at was a private citizen who, for the sake of argument, took down the actual suspect before you got there?
That's a problem.
Training to know how to react to that, and you end up shooting somebody who actually was stopping the robber simply because they don't know.
No, you're absolutely right. But when it comes to police-involved shootings, we have to understand what reaction time is, okay? And in the time that it takes to say that, our life's in danger as well, you see? Who created this situation?
The person with the gun.
Right? Right? We're sent to address the situation, all right, and bring the situation under control in one way or another, all right? And we have to do it safely, and we all have wives and kids to go home to at night, you see? Yes, sir?
Last question. I hate to sound like Columbo. But you're there, you're the robber there. You quickly drop the gun and you put your hands up. That's not going to trigger a shooting reaction from you, is it? If I just, immediately I comply. But I comply and turn toward you. That's cool, right? You don't shoot or you do shoot?
I can't speak for every officer, okay? I could tell you one thing, though. We train our officers, and I'm not so much talking about when you're face-to-face with somebody, but we constantly train trigger discipline, okay? And we also make our officers aware of sympathetic reflex, where if they're a startle response, so that's why we train trigger discipline. Dave, show them what I'm talking about.
Fingers off the trigger. I put my finger in the trigger well until I'm ready to use it.
We don't ever want to shoot somebody out of a startle response, okay? Every scenario we put a recruit through and an officer through, a seasoned officer through, there's one instructor assigned just to watch that trigger finger. Because it happens. They'll creep into the trigger guard because you're not really thinking, but we constantly harp on trigger discipline, okay, so we don't have a startled response. It's a tough job. Our commander likes to tell people it's the hardest job in America, okay? Because is there a job in America that's more scrutinized than police work? Be honest. It's tough. It's tough. So, anything else? Yes, ma'am.
I'm not sure if it's been asked. You guys are definitely the experts. You've been trained, and you understand the trigger happy book. My challenge is with the experts. Why is it in every incident that the officer is shooting to kill instead of shooting to maim or to injure?
Yeah, I just talked about that.
Is to shoot, because I also went to go to the shooting range, and I know it is precise, it is direct, and if you are trained as an officer, why not just shoot to disable the person? But it's always a situation where the officer is shooting to kill, and that's the part that puzzled me when you are considered the expert in shooting.
Why do you say we're shooting to kill?
Because in the incident, most of the incident recently, last year, has been death involved. So, people running, with the backs, so I'm just curious, when there is a death and the perpetrator doesn't have a gun and the officer is shooting from the back, the person is running, and they're running with their back or their hands are up, it's always seemed to be with the officer, whether it is a robbery or whether it's always seemed to be they're shooting to kill versus shooting to maim or to injure. And I'm just curious about why is that seem to be always evident in these shooting incidents.
Well, I discussed this earlier. I don't know when you joined us, but, okay. There's several institutions that have done studies on shootings, okay? And one of them is Force Science. And Force Science has said, they've proven over and over and over again that when a person's involved in a critical incident, okay, where their heart's racing and they're scared, they're in fear for their life, that they lose control of their fine motor skills. So they just, meaning their dexterity in their fingers, their decision-making kind of drops a little bit, they're hyper-vigilant, and we recognize that. So to ask an officer in a high-stress situation like that to aim for the arm or to aim for the leg, it's not a reasonable request. We train center mass, and we train to shoot until the threat is stopped, okay? If we shoot and the suspect drops the gun, we train that the shooting stops at that point, okay? Because it's to neutralize the threat, and that's it. We don't shoot to kill. Now, unfortunately, there's bullets involved, and the bullets do kill people sometimes, as we see every day all across the country, okay? But that's not our intent. Our intent is to stop the person, and we realize that our officers, human beings aren't made up under stressful situation like that to be able to aim for an arm or for a leg and to maim, okay? We have to hit the area that's most readily accessible to us at the time to stop that threat, to save our own lives or to save the life of another citizen. That's why we train that way, okay? Yes, sir.
Personally, it kind of comes with instances where they kind of empty the clip, or it just seems like everyone is shooting until they don't have any more bullets. So I'm just trying to see where you say once the threat has been stopped that shooting stops, but there's been countless videos, evidence that even when the body is dropped, there's still bullets. So,
well, I'd have to have you be more specific than that. I mean,
16 times he was shot.
okay. Let me tell you something about that. Okay, and I'm not familiar with that particular case, but what did I just tell you about how many rounds could be fired in a second? What did I say? 6 rounds in a second, okay? How many rounds in a third of a second? 2. All right, so Officer Freitag, Officer Veer, and myself, we're dispatched on a run, man with a gun run, okay? The 3 of us approach. Man's holding the gun. He turns around, okay? We all have our guns out. He turns around, points the gun at us, doesn't point the gun at us, whatever. We all respond, okay? We all shoot our gun for 1 second. It takes him 1 second to fall to the ground and drop the gun. How many rounds were fired? 6. Do your math. 18 rounds. All 3 of us saw the threat. We don't start the day at the substation and say, you know what, hey, Pat, I shot yesterday, so why don't you shoot today? Okay, we don't do that. Okay, we all 3 perceived the threat, and we all 3 shot. We've already determined that in 1 second you could shoot 6 rounds. 6 times 3 is 18 rounds, so that might explain why the man was shot that many times, okay? Because it took a second for him to go down and drop that weapon that could possibly kill us. Does that make sense to everybody?
But most of the time, there's a overreaction. And so it's like I think we're having 2 conversations, because there is truly you can go home and protect yourself and go home to your wife and family. But most of the time it looks unjustified because of the situation that African Americans are put in. And so it looks bad, so there's a trust thing. And so I'm not dropping the gun because I don't think I'm gonna get a fair shot. So we all gonna go crazy, and I know that put everybody in a bad situation. So because of the overreaction.
Well, I can tell you that we've had several groups within the Division of Police. Officer Tommy Page, anybody know Tommy? Tommy and some other people have gone to most of the high schools and most of the community groups, and they have a course called ABCs of Policing, okay? And they're trying to educate young people on the stuff that I've told you about today, the third of a second reaction time, okay? To try to get them to realize that, hey, there's no option of standing there holding a gun when a police officer's telling you to drop it, okay? Because you may not realize the danger that you're putting that police officer in, but you are, Okay, and the police officer, again, doesn't know your intent. And the police officer is not required to know their intent, per the courts, per the Supreme Court. So, like I said, it's a tough job. The last thing I want, and I've never had to shoot anybody, and I'm really glad, and I hope to God I never have to, okay? But that's my worst day as a police officer. It'd be a terrible situation. Nobody wants that. That's the most stressful thing a police officer will go through. And we try to, I had somebody one time that I've had a couple people that I'd be justified in shooting, and I didn't. I don't know why I didn't do it. I'm glad I didn't, because it turned out okay, but you just don't know. Yes?
We had a program some years ago called the Herman Rights Program, when we was trying to take our neighborhood back from crack and drug dealers. Chief Jackson he came out to our civic association meeting. He had a big panel. And he told us in certain target areas, if, say we'll use Linden, Hilltop, Brittany Hills for our area. Brittany Hills was off the hook 30 years ago. And we had these programs of trying to take back our community. And he said, let me tell you, he said, our officers are trained when they go in these real bad areas. If you got your hand on the wheel, please do not make a move. They are trained to kill. Now, what is meant by that statement? This is the chief of police telling us. When they go in an area, we hit the dots on the counter where they have killings and shootings constantly. And our area was one of these areas 30 years ago. He said, when these trained professional officers have come, please keep your hand on the wheel, especially between the hours of 12 to 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning. He said, our officers are trained to kill. What was meant by that statement?
I have no idea. That was 30 years ago.
It was chief of police when we had crack and crime really rampant into our neighborhood. He said, these officers are trained to kill. So do not make a move. Keep your hands on the wheel. Speak very gently, because they know about these areas. These areas are dangerous. They got high weapons, probably guns that meet y'all guns. So in seeing this, I kind of realized this, because in your examples, you're telling the officers are trained to protect themselves. So you see gun, you shoot. And I just want the honesty to be, we are to protect the public by any means possible, and I agree with that. At the time, I agreed with Brittany Hill, because we had killings on top of killings and drug shootings and everything. But, and he was honest with us. Our officers are not going to get hurt. And we have 4 interested in Brittany Hills. We had stood out the night, crack dealer, leave our neighborhood. The news media had to come, and we did all these things. Now we got to live over neighborhood, thanks to you, great officers. But what I'm saying, I think in certain targeted areas, we are trained to be more professional shooters than others, to try to kind of say neutralize the problems that we are having. You would say, I think, I was raised up in the Hilltop part. I think we got about 300 or 400 killings last year, and I think half of them was from the Hilltop and South Linden. In these areas, he told us back then, our officers are trained to kill in those areas. Now, I don't know what that meant. If these are dangerous people, we use dangerous tactics. Sure. And they got the same kind of weapons that we got, and that was told to us.
I've been with the division almost 23 years. It'll be 23 years in December. I think I told you that in the beginning. I've never heard that term, we shoot to kill. We train to kill. Never. Ever, ever. So I don't know why Chief Jackson would have said that to your group. Maybe it was a different time, 7 years before I came on, but that's not something I've ever heard. Yes, ma'am.
I just wanted to say one thing, I hope I'm not stepping on anybody's toes. The Columbus Division of Police has a Citizen Police Academy, and you can learn everything you're asked to do.
Thank you.
It's right here.
All right.
All right, would everybody please give Sergeant Cheatham and his crew a big hand? Thank you so much. Thank you. He has also agreed to join us in the panel discussion, so there will be time for questions and answers after that's done. I'd like to ask right now for the panelists to please come up front. We were going to give you a little break, but no breaks. You know how life is, no breaks, okay? We're excited to share this with you. I am honored to have one of our commissioners, Sid Gross. He is a commissioner on the Community Relations Commission, and he will be the MC this afternoon. and I think everybody's going to learn quite a bit. And we are honored to have each of you panelists, and we thank you for being here, and we thank the audience for being here as well.
Good morning. Thank you for being here. Sorry there's no break. Feel free to get food and beverages as we continue. Excellent. Sergeant, thank you. That was great. I've been asking, I'm a newly appointed commissioner. I was appointed in May, so I'm relatively new, but a big focus of mine is to try to normalize the relationship between our community and our police. Growing up in Milwaukee, as kids, we'd chase cruisers to get boxes of Cracker Jacks that had little stickers in them, and now it's the opposite. I was at a hearing where I heard a young man say, we run regardless of our actions because we don't know what else to do. So it's broken. And thank you for your tenacity and hanging in there and keeping us safe. It's a tough gig. That was tough. It was tough getting shot. It was tough hearing what you guys go through. And it was actually really interesting hearing the comments from the audience about just your observations. It's fun, not fun, but it's interesting to see different perspectives from different chairs. So thank you for your involvement today as well. All right, moving into today, we have, the topic is neighborhood safety, neighborhood violence. And hopefully you all got a lot out of the personal safety piece, because that's a lot, taking personal responsibility for our surroundings and for those that we live, work, and play with. I wanted to start with just beginning with the sergeant. Just introduce yourself a little bit and kind of introduce who you are with.
Okay, I did this earlier, but maybe some of you weren't here. Sergeant Chris Cheatham, been with the division almost 23 years. I spent my first 20 years in patrol, the whole time in the Franklinton area, the 8th Precinct, the city of Columbus. My first 10 years, I was on night shift as a patrol officer. Then I did 5 years on day shift, and then I got promoted to sergeant, and my reward for getting promoted to sergeant is they put me back on night shift. So I was there for 5 years, and then I was fortunate enough to get offered an assignment that I have now at the academy, which my wife was really happy about because it got me off night shift. And now I train our officers in use of force and our use of force policies, our use of force tactics, and we're pretty busy in our office. So that's what I do.
Thank you, Sergeant.
You're welcome.
My name is Susanna Warren. I'm the Outreach and Program Director for the Compassionate Communication Center. I'm also a certified trainer for the International Center for Nonviolent Communication. So we work with people to communicate in a way that de-escalates and fosters connection.
Good almost afternoon. We're 5 minutes out, so good afternoon. My name is Emerald Hernandez. I'm an assistant director here at the Department of Neighborhoods. My area of focus is the comprehensive neighborhood safety strategy. That was quick.
I'm Nancy Evans, and my company's name is New Age Crime Stoppers. And I'm on a mission to raise awareness about personal safety and defense. I do programs. I always say I'll speak to 200 to 200 plus anybody who'll listen to me, because if we're more aware and prepared, we can cut down on some crime.
My name's Joe Kermode. I'm a Columbus police officer. I work 13 Precinct, which is the south side of the city, pretty much Parsons Avenue, the Southfield neighborhood, everything south of Phoebus. Been with the division just over 3 years as of 10 days ago. I'm also a member of the crisis intervention team. We respond to individuals suffering from mental crisis and try to get them into treatment. I'm also a Narcan trainer for the division, train officers to respond and administer naloxone to individuals suffering from an opioid overdose.
Great, thank you. Interesting, we have a very experienced and a not so experienced officer taking each end. Thank you for both being here. Thank you to all the panelists. This should be a good conversation. So I want to dig in a little bit about into the 5 panelists and talk about your experiences personally with respect to violence. If you could share the incident, if you're comfortable, and then any repercussions as a result. And let's go ahead and start with you, JC. Let's switch it up.
Personally, for me, violence, most of it is responding immediately after violence has occurred in the community. The only thing that's really happened to me a couple months ago, I had a female that was fired from her job and didn't want to leave, and the bosses wanted her to leave. We were called to assist helping her leave. She decided to try to punch me in the face and spit on me. So she was recently convicted of felony assault on a police officer. But most recently, the last week on my precinct, we've had 4 shootings at the same house. Mostly people under 18, 17-year-olds, 16-year-olds with guns.
So that's what we've been experiencing recently. We had a 17-year-old that is going to be paralyzed from the neck down as a result of these shootings.
Well, thank you. Please, yes.
The reason I do what I do is because of violence. We have a family of friends who had 2 beautiful daughters, and one turned up missing. I cannot explain to you how horrible an experience it is to have someone that you love and care about missing. And we went through all the motions and, putting signs up and hoping and praying every day that she would be safe. And unfortunately, she was murdered. And that was the resolve to try to do something to prevent the pain for other people.
Thank you.
So where it affects me directly is my job. The vast majority of my job is the comprehensive neighborhood safety strategy. So I focus on violent incidences in 3 different neighborhoods, the South Side, the Hilltop, and Linden. We also track the homicides right now in Linden, and the mayor announced just on Monday we will be bringing in the Hilltop and the South Side in September and October respectively. So my job is to look at what's happening and where the violence is happening and see where we can look to bring in infrastructure to try and combat some of this violence. Ultimately, infrastructure isn't the only way. Law enforcement isn't the only way. We got to come at it comprehensively, hence the name. So I work with different organizations, one being the CARE Coalition. A woman asked a question earlier, and she mentioned how they're going door to door and knocking and talking with residents. Really just to talk to people. And a big thing of lifting a neighborhood and revitalizing a neighborhood is mobility and motion and people being on that front porch and people being comfortable enough and safe enough to be out in their neighborhoods. There's a distinct difference between the neighborhoods I'm focusing on and neighborhoods that I am not. So when I see violence, I am fortunate enough to be able to look through it with a work lens, and I'm very blessed to be able to say that. But when I look at violence, I luckily get to break it into data and then use that data to make investments. So,
Great, Susanna.
Mm-hmm. How violence has impacted me is I grew up in a home with a lot of violence as well as a community, and I experienced trauma. It's taken my lifetime of practices and support moving through that. I think it led me to the work that I do right now with compassionate nonviolent communication. Another time that I experienced violence is someone I had been renting a home and they locked me in the house. And it didn't result in violence, but it was a violent act. And I noticed the difference between the 2 experiences, growing up and then experiencing it at a later time where I had more internal resources, more ways to interact with the person, more ways like what was shared earlier, how to protect myself, and more inner resources to tap into with a community. So that second one didn't have that same impact when I had more skill and resources versus when I was growing up and didn't have those support systems.
Thank you.
I don't know where to begin. I've responded on numerous shootings and stabbings and homicides and made probably hundreds of arrests for domestic violence, assaults, felonious assaults. It's the nature of our job. There was a time, fortunately, where I'm at now, I don't see it, but my years in patrol, I saw it every day almost. So I've seen it a lot.
But you have, thank you. The next 3 items that we have, the community safety strategy came to mind when you talked about the 3 target neighborhoods, and that there's no mistaking the fact that all neighborhoods are not the same. They don't, socioeconomically, geographically, there's a lot of differences, and subsequently the behaviors of those stakeholders are different. I wanted to talk a little bit about what the 5 panelists see in their communities, and I don't know if that's the work community or your personal community, but just broadly, what you see in your community. Let's start again with you with respect to violence.
Well, I'm kind of removed from it now. So in my days in patrol, though, I noticed that drinking and drug use led to violence a lot, obviously. Sure. And poor dynamics within the home, poor communication skills between people living in the home. That's to me, that's what the drinking, the drugs, and just poor communication in general, and maybe lack of jobs. I mean, just sitting around and you know, getting on each other's nerves because you're there all day long. That's, to me, that led to a lot of violence.
Yeah, yeah. Suzanne?
For me, my partner and I own a home both in Clintonville and the Hilltop, so I have a vast experience in both. And what I see in Clintonville is a lot of community advocacy and people working together, and they have resources. And what I see in the Hilltop is that when people don't have resources, like you said, sometimes they don't have things to do, they don't have access to money and resources that they need. So I do see violence and crime, people stealing things. And when I put another lens on, because I live in the Hilltop for several reasons. One is I want to make a difference. So when I'm with community agents who are trying to make a difference, like the Columbus Care Coalition or the YMCA, then I can see, and I'm with the people who want to make a difference. So it's really what lens I'm looking through. But certainly resources play a big part of that. People having support, having jobs, and having food, and having access to health care and healthcare services if they need that.
So I live in Marion Village on the south side, and we do have incidences nearby, and when we hear, things going on. But I do want to get at what we talked about, not having a job or not having resources. When I look at the three neighborhoods I focus on, there are some very common threads, and not having a job is one of them. But when you look at, and I invite you to look at what not having a job means, or what being underemployed means. One of the first reasons people end up getting a divorce is finance. If you're making a decision whether or not to buy groceries or to get your meds, these are very real decisions. If I am sick, am I still taking myself to work even though I'm contagious because I have to get my paycheck, right? These are things that we see where people are making very difficult decisions, where many of us, if I need to go pick up milk, I can just swing through on the way home, right? In a lot of my neighborhoods, that's not an option. It's not like, well, let me check my bank account to make sure I have the money to get the milk, to get what I need, right? Or whatever it might be. Those are very real decisions that are being made in our communities right now. When we look at, again, those three neighborhoods, and I look at what's happening in them and where investments have been made, it's not a coincidence that when we see the Celebrate One neighborhoods, we see my target neighborhoods, whatever target neighborhoods we have across these cities, there's a reason why they landed where they landed. And it goes back 100 years to redlining with some of the decisions our federal government made about where we're making investments. And those investments were made based on who was living in the neighborhoods. So was it a high minority rate? Was it a high immigrant rate? What's happening in those neighborhoods? So when I stare at my work when it comes to violence and where I'm at, it's not some magical situation where like a little got sprinkled over here and a little got sprinkled over here, and like, look, we have violence, right? Like there's a root cause of it that really put people in a situation to make difficult decisions and to make decisions that really aren't the best decisions. But in that moment, a decision is made, and I remember tutoring my mentee. He grew up on the west side, and he doesn't have many options. So I had to keep working with him. You do have options. You have less options than other kids, but what are your options, and let's make the best of your options, right? And I'm fortunate enough and blessed enough to be able to step back and coach him through that. But when you're in that moment and you're 15, 16, and you don't have that experience to be able to do that, a lot of that, when you keep combining it and layering it and layering it and layering it, right? That's how we get a lot of our neighborhoods end up being as we refer to them, target neighborhoods. So as we have this discussion about violence, there's roots, and it comes from somewhere. So I invite that.
Absolutely.
Well, when I speak to different groups, and I'm in a whole lot of different communities, and I see a lot of different, crime and that, and I speak to a lot of block watches, and the whole clue to that, I believe, is participation, neighborhood participation. And when I go in to speak to one and there's nobody there, then I know things have been kind of quiet. But then I go into, and the room is full. Well, there's Barbara, she has a group that they meet in each other's homes. Do you still do that? And there was a good group of people, but they're watching out for each other. And I think when we think back to some of us who are a little bit older, the neighborhood looked out for each other. And but when both parents went to work, that I think is a big factor in some of the things that are going on, because the children were more, latchkey or left alone, and have some different influences going on. But I think a real need is to try to bring back the neighborhood looking out for each other. And if you don't have a block watch, please work on getting one, because that, I think, is a very key thing in keeping your neighborhood safe.
That's great. That will come up a little bit later in today's agenda.
Kind of spiraling off what she's saying about community relations with your neighbors and everything. The south side where I work, Marion Village, there's a very high level of transient population. There's a lot of people renting. Not a lot of people own their homes. They don't have that personal investment in that community. They don't have that collective efficacy with the person next door of, hey, I'm invested, I'm a member of the south side community. It's just another home for 6 months until either the landlord evicts them or they move to Linden or they move to the east side. So we don't have that investment where they care about their neighbors, where they care about their house. They may not paint it, mow their grass. In these communities too, we also see, higher unemployment rates, a lack of investment, like she was talking about, of companies that provide a livable wage.
All good, great points. The next two, talking about, and I think the first one's almost rhetorical, and are some neighborhoods affected more than others in this space? I think we can all agree that yes. And now it's just a matter of drilling down into why, and then ultimately what things can we do to put Band-Aids on this stuff, and ultimately to fully heal the community. And a big part of that is your neighbors, and I think I've seen a change over the last couple of decades in my personal life, just seeing that's kind of, it's not as prevalent as it used to be. But why are some neighborhoods, and I'll start again with you, Sergeant, why are some neighborhoods, in your opinion, more affected than other neighborhoods in this space?
I think a lot of it is socioeconomic, lack of education, and then higher degrees of drinking and drug abuse, lack of jobs. So that's why.
So it's an evil cycle of just feeding off one another.
Yes.
Susanna?
I do think it's availability to resources, but I also think what my colleague said here earlier, there's a history of how our neighborhoods got sectioned, and there's a piece of racism that's happened over the last 50, 60, 100 years, and that has a play in it of how we sort of got to where we are right now. So I want to take all that in as we try to make a difference now.
Yeah, so building off of what was pointed to earlier, I think it's a mode you're in. If you're living in Clintonville, you have options, right? You can catch a bus, you can get to where you gotta go, you can walk to a grocery store, right? You're living, you're hanging out, right? You're doing what you do every day. If you go into other neighborhoods, people are in survival mode. And you know what, when they survive, they're gonna survive. I also work in homelessness. Those are my two areas, like violence and homicide and homelessness. People will survive, and if it involves taking something that they feel they need, and what's not fun and what's really kind of just not great is sometimes that need is an addiction. We will survive as human beings, and it doesn't justify it, doesn't mean it's right, but when you look at where you see violence, at the heart of violence and what is happening, a lot of it comes down to what is the situation they are in, and when you see those young kids with guns that for some reason they triggered, right, fight or flight, and they fought, and we now have a 17-year-old that's paralyzed from the neck down. Whatever that situation was, they went into a survival mode, and you don't go into survival mode for no reason. And socioeconomic very much plays into it. It takes 3 generations to break a poverty cycle. It takes a while, right? You start making money, and that doesn't mean you know what to do with that money, right? It takes a couple generations to even know what to do with money and getting by, and how do you utilize money, right? To stabilize yourself and not just your home, and then eventually your community, right? It takes generations. So you know, yes, I think socioeconomic is very much a root of part of it. I think environment's a part of it, and it's just one of those things. It's a soup, if you will.
Yeah.
I really can't add too much to that. I think that all your suggestions are absolutely true. One thing I do find sometimes is a naivete as far as in the nicer neighborhoods that they say, oh, it can't happen in my neighborhood. So there's also, people need to realize that crime can be anywhere.
Kind of continuing the socioeconomic, when there's just complete lack of education, a lack of investment, either in the private sector or the public sector in a community. And then we talk about the fight or flight response. A lot of the people I run into that are illegally carrying firearms some of them aren't gang members, some of them aren't dealing drugs. They have it because one of their family members is in an argument with somebody and they don't want to be caught being assaulted. They want to have that self-defense, and that's the only way they view being able to defend themselves. They don't view any other legitimate means of defending themselves. So if that person gets caught with a firearm, gets a felony conviction, now they can't get a quality job. We're not able to start that 3 generations at that point.
Yeah. Huh. That's fascinating. Yeah, I mean, I think again, socioeconomic access to health, to food, to education, all that stuff, it's all, the worlds collide, for sure. The next topic we have is talking about personal safety. I think we've hit that pretty hard. I know all of you weren't here, but the sergeant and his officers, wherever you guys ended up, did a great job teaching us about some real-life tactics, from ABCs to some higher level, more strategic suggestions. But with the exception of the 2 officers, do the 3 of you have any advice or any suggestions with respect to de-escalating conflict or any personal experiences you can share? I'll just tell you about mine on Sunday. I had a constituent who was unhappy with a policy and came up and literally pressed his belly against mine and wanted to do whatever was next. So I stepped back, created that reactionary gap. Yeah, it's pretty good, right? And it all de-escalated with a couple other folks that came in, and we didn't have to call the police or do anything weird. But it's pretty crazy. Just that was the first time that's happened to me, and hopefully the last. But we all have to be aware and prepared to handle that kind of stuff. So any that you can add, Susanna?
Yeah, for me, I really liked a lot that was shared earlier in your demonstrations. Like in my work, really having self-awareness, what's going on for me. First of all, when I feel that hair growing up on the back of my neck, and then when I'm in a conflict, to really focus in on what's going on for me, but then with the person that I'm in conflict with, listening. That's mainly the field that I'm teaching often, but there's skillful listening when you're offering empathy or getting to the root of what's underneath what's going on, what matters to that person. I've seen that hundreds of times, to be able to really let someone know you care. And I'm not talking about, it doesn't have to be warm and fuzzy care. I mean, letting someone know that they're screaming, matching them, that I care. I want to know what's going on. Help me understand what's going on for you. So giving someone some space to kind of get over that hump of where they're trigger happy, and being able to also have the awareness within myself that I'm not in fight, flight, or freeze. So when I'm in fight, if I'm not physically fighting, I'm judging, I'm criticizing, I'm giving advice, I'm reacting. So being with someone else or myself in a way that de-escalates things, creates a table where both of us matter, where we can get our needs on the table.
As I was taught in college, when you're speaking at someone or talking to someone, and when you're in an argument, you're speaking at them, you're not talking. So a little technique that I've used multiple times, I've also worked in government and had many constituents really be angry at me for a lot of reasons. I'm sure that was why the sun was blocked out that day. So something I was taught actually is you start to speak softer and slower, and people start leaning in to listen, and it literally lowers kind of their temperature and their heart rate a little bit. So while everyone's speaking way up here and you hear the arguments around you, I'll come in and just start speaking very soft and very low, so they have to take the time to hear the words I'm saying. So if we want to readjust, and I understand you're very angry, let's get to the bottom of that. Let's see where you're angry. I've used it many times when people are upset about homeless camps being near them and they're all shouting at me about all these horrible, terrible things. And let's go back and, all right, so what are you angry about? Give me one thing you're angry about and what's a goal I can achieve to help you get to a better place for your neighborhood, right? And you just bring it, you literally just like lower it. And it's been very helpful when dealing with some angry, very angry people who want an instant response. And I try not to meet them there. I don't always do it. I do my best to try and do that as often as possible.
That's really good. Write that down, for sure.
Well, my whole thing, as was mentioned before, is awareness and preparedness. And one thing that Officer Cheatham mentioned was, the people walking around and not paying attention and looking at their phone. Or one thing that really upsets me is when I see someone running with their ear or the radio on and all that. And if I have the opportunity, I will say, hey, please, you need to be aware of your surroundings. And some people look at me like I'm crazy, but it bothers me because I know that they are just putting themselves out there. So just trying to look out, once again, for each other.
Officer Kermode, I gave you a pass, but I'm going to bring you back into this topic because we talked a little bit about de-escalations, and you're a crisis intervention officer. So often drugs and alcohol are part of that calculus. So how would I, on Sunday, dealing with someone who had been drinking pretty heavily, who confronted me, handle that differently than had it been someone who hadn't been influenced by drugs or alcohol?
Yeah, so when you're dealing with somebody that is under the influence of either alcohol or drugs, their judgment and their decision-making processes are all going to be either slowed or, in some cases, completely eliminated. The most important thing you can do, like she was talking about, slow down, speak calmly, try to get them to come down and match. It's really weird when you do it for the first time. Somebody's yelling at you. If you use it with your significant other, if your husband or wife is yelling at you, if you match, there's no communication when two people are yelling. So if you escalate up to that drunk person or that high person's level, there's zero chance of any communication happening. So if you bring it down and you can kind of hopefully try to bring them down to that level, slow things down, try to address things kind of point by point. Don't try to take big picture things. Yeah.
Good, excellent. Yeah, that was helpful. Good, let's learn a few things there. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about resources. Let's shift the paradigm a teeny bit. So what would you guys recommend? I heard the ABCs of law enforcement. I've not heard of that program. I'd like, as a commissioner, to be part of that program, to have to sit through that just to learn a little more about it. But also with the school systems and other, whether it's a faith-based entity or what have you, what other resources could you bring to this group's attention that we may not already be aware of, Sergeant?
I don't know.
So talk just quickly about ABCs of law enforcement. How long does it last?
It's a presentation that lasts, well, if Tommy's talking, it lasts about 2 to 3 hours. It could be given in an hour. Tommy does an excellent job with it, but he's got the gift of gab. So, but no, it's just a good kind of elementary course into why the police do what they do, and it just educates people on, because I think a lot of people think they understand police work because of what they see in movies and on television, and it couldn't be further from the truth most of the time. That's not how it is.
I'll tell you that one step further, even looking at social media tidbits doesn't always define the full narrative. I watched the interactions today, and I respect what you guys do, all of you officers in here. It's a tough gig, for sure. And the trust needs to work 360. If we don't trust you and you don't trust us, the whole thing is going to break, for sure. Columbus Trust is a relatively new entity doing a lot of great work in that space. Susanna.
Yes. My organization offers a couple intros a month for free. We also do training every 3 months on the foundations of compassionate nonviolent communication. There's a charge for that, but we do have scholarships, so we don't turn anyone away that wants to come to the training. We also partner with the City of Columbus and the Columbus Care Coalition. They do a ton of trauma-informed care. I think there's a lot of resources if we're looking for them with the YMCA, the YWCA, and the Columbus Care Coalition, as well as our center.
Oh, wow. So individuals looking to impact violence in the community. a few different ways. So that, just so you know, that as part of my job, we do have dollars set aside to do infrastructure investment. So this is, I'll do a little bit of city and a little bit of what I know. So for the city, we're looking to bring in additional lighting, cut back tree canopies, bring in pocket parks, and bring in, and take care of vacant and abandoned housing. That's something we see in all 3 neighborhoods. So that's one way we're trying to get at community violence. It kind of goes back to the broken light theory or some of the other theories we've seen out of Chicago and the subways in New York. If you haven't had a chance to read Tipping Point by Malcolm Gladwell, he explains both cities, and it's amazing where they start at the base of something, and then it goes on to create a different situation. So in New York, the subway was having issues in the 80s. A gentleman ended up shooting 3 kids. They tried to give him a hard time, hey, give me your money, and he pulled out a gun and killed all 3 of them. And he ended up being found not guilty because he was reacting to the incident, right? And it was this huge thing in New York. And they brought in a new chief of police for their subway, and he said, no one's skipping the line anymore. What they would do is people would jam up quarters or coins into the line and then hop it. He said, starting there, we are starting there. No one will ever skip a line again, and we're starting there. And he purposely did it to show if you cannot skip a line, that means you cannot mug someone down there. That means you cannot murder someone down there. So obviously this is a very broken down version of it. But that's what they did, right? If someone were tagging a train, they painted that tag right in front of those kids. They would literally wait for the kids to finish tagging it, or the people, not all of them were kids, and paint it white right over them as they were watching. They're starting at kind of basic ways of saying this is unacceptable. And then it kind of kept spiraling and spiraling and spiraling, and now they have a much safer subway system, right? So I would say in your communities, kind of take on a bit of a tipping point, if you will. What are little things happening around you that you can say are unacceptable? Or what are little things you can do, keeping your porch light on, keeping an eye on what's going on in your neighborhood? We all want to get back to where neighbors are taking care of neighbors. Sit on your front porch. It's huge. Safe Routes to School has this thing called, has this one program called Porch Parents. They sit on the porch and watch, kids come and go to school, right? Just by being alert and by being aware, just that alone is one of the first things we can do to kind of really help get at what's happening in a community that can lead to violence. When you look at what's happening in Linden and things like that, we've noticed the first few homicides, the first 5 that I've stared at, none of them were from Linden, none of them. But we had to deal with their homicide in Linden. So there's a reason why people think they can get away with things in Linden that they don't think they can get away with in Clintonville.
Is that why it was an opportunist situation?
Not all of it. I'm not law enforcement. I don't want to say this is prescribed. This is exactly why it happened. But as we look at the trends, right, the 5 homicides since May 1, none of them were from Linden. There was one, a person was shot and they left the person in Linden. They're not going to leave someone in Grandview or Upper Arlington or Clintonville. There's a good chance that people will be out there to see you doing what you're doing, right? But not in that area. So part of what we're looking at when it comes to that violence is, again, getting people to that front porch, getting people out and about in that neighborhood and getting that mobility going, I think is critical for your neighborhood. And then on an individual level, mentoring is huge right now. Statistically, we're seeing more and more people who maybe aren't finishing high school, who maybe don't have that adult in their life to give them that perspective. As I spoke with my mentee, you have less choices based on where you're at right now, but how do we make the best of your choices, right? Being able to provide, not that I'm the perfect mentor, but even being imperfect, you're still providing some guidance to someone that needs that guidance. And when I invite you to check out Big Brothers Big Sisters. Columbus City Schools is who I mentor through. And I was the biggest person, I don't think you want me mentoring a youth right now. I'm not the best person for it. You really are, because if you're willing to take that time and just provide that guidance or just be there to listen to them, to help them talk through what they're going through, it's one of the best ways you can, on an individual level, truly just help our kids coming up today. So. Mm-hmm.
I think you said a key thing, and that is about our kids and having something to do that is productive and have people mentor them. That is a wonderful idea. I think that there are programs in the neighborhoods, Neighborhood Pride, and different programs to try to bring the neighborhoods together and also give a good image of our law enforcement and that they are very, very active in these programs. So I agree that we do have neighborhoods that they are, conflicted as far as the crime, but if we all work together and try to reach out and help the kids and help your neighbor, I think we could do a lot better in this area.
Kind of divide this into two separate points. First, going off of what Sergeant Cheatham was talking about, the ABCs of policing. Another thing you could do a ride-along. Come out and sit with me in a cruiser for 8 hours, or 10 hours if we get some overtime on a late run or something. But come out and sit with me. There's no better way to learn than go to a class and come out and sit in a cruiser with an officer for 8 hours in your community. You can do it. I've had people from Marion Village come out and do a ride-along on 13 Precinct with me for 8 hours. You get to see a whole nother side of the community where you live. The second point for members of the community, August 7th, I wrote it down, it's National Night Out. They do that in all these communities. The block watches organize cookouts, parties for kids. The police officers attend that, and the community liaison officers attend that as well. I'd highly recommend attending that. And another way to reach out too is to find out, reach out to your community liaison officer. The phone number for their office is 614-645-4610. Reach out to them, ask what's going on in the community, when and where are the meetings, when and where are the events, and they can kind of put you on the right path.
Does everyone understand or are familiar with the community police liaison, mission, vision, or anything with respect? Would you mind giving us a quick little elevator pitch?
Yeah, so pretty much I believe it's each precinct has a community liaison officer. It's an officer that does not work patrol. They don't get in a cruiser every day and drive around, but their job is to meet with members of the community, work with code enforcement, go to block watch meetings, listen to the needs of the community, and coming to the police and saying, hey, this house is a drug house. Hey, this house is a vacant and the grass is 10 feet tall, and we need code enforcement to come out and take care of it. This street needs more lights. We need the road repaved. The sidewalks need to be added to this street. That's an avenue where you can go through the community liaison officer, and they can talk to code enforcement and try to start having progress be made.
The term liaison is really kind of the base term, because there are a path to all sorts of other resources across the board. So thank you for that. Block Watch came up a bit ago. Let's talk a little bit about how that can happen, why that should happen, and then the steps to actually effectuate that change. You want to start with that neighborhood safety strategy? Do you know that?
I just met with the Southside's Block Watch leaders yesterday. And actually, I think you're a great person, this one too. So getting involved with your Block Watch is really critical in my mind. Being aware of, again, who your neighbors are. At your Block Watch meetings, there will be discussions about the trends that are happening in your neighborhood, if there's been break-ins lately and what led to those break-ins. So yesterday they talked about the latest 3 break-ins in the area, I guess, were open windows. Right, so something very basic. If you open that window to get that good breeze, make sure you lock it when you're done, right? So that's what's really discussed at a lot of the Block Watch meetings I've been to. So it just becomes critical. I think another great thing they talked about was the type of door you should have. Yeah. There's some door that I guess is like the best door to have, right? So being involved in your Block Watch, I think, is critical, and that's going to be where I do my work around the investment and where we're going to be bringing in strategies to help, again, bring in infrastructure to help bring in. I keep using the word bring in, to bring in infrastructure to help affect safety in the neighborhood. So as I roll out dollars, as I start looking at focusing on areas to, whether it's a sidewalk, lighting, whatever it might be, I want to work with the neighbors who are paying attention to their community, and a lot of times that's your Block Watch. What's happening? Were the 3 robbery or burglaries where a window was open, was it also dark in front of that house? What's the sidewalks look like in front of that house? What does it look like in that environment where that crime took place? So my discussions will be with safety committees and the Block Watches. So if you want to be involved and you live in one of those 3 neighborhoods, by all means, please get involved.
Absolutely. It's a great resource. We started one in the west side of New Albany, but Columbus residents, and we had Officer Dave Harp, who he taught us all. First of all, he hosted a big welcome event. So the police department did a great job helping us coordinate and actually operate the event, not just at the beginning, but they still are doing it up in New Albany, doing a great job. I've subsequently left. But it's a great program. Any of you guys have Block Watches that you're aware of at your yes? Anybody else? Okay, so that's a takeaway from today. Dig into your Block Watch opportunity at home. If you have something that's already created, get involved. Otherwise, look at creating one. And a big piece that I keep hearing is neighbors. and neighbors, and, you know, the front porch thing is great, because that's a super easy tactic that will open up all sorts of doors. You'll meet people you haven't met in years. But the neighborhood and the neighbor piece of the Block Watch is as important as any other piece. So I would encourage you to look into that. Any other comments on the Block Watch?
Yes. There's a Block Watch on the south end off of Parsons in that area, and it's Ganther's place. And they not only have Block Watch meetings, but they bring the community together in so many different ways. They have events, they have Halloween, they have things for the children. That's their trunk or treat. Yes, that with the kids and getting them involved. And they are just a great template because they have gotten people to beautify their places. They created a community garden, and that is something to be proud of. And if you want a template, I would contact them because they are doing a great job.
So that was who has that template?
It's Ganther's place.
Ganther's place?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, great. And back to your comment about the phone number, and if anyone here has an interest in taking this initiative home and implementing it, how would one go about doing that? Besides calling that number, is there an online resource?
To officially start a Block Watch, you have to go through the community liaison office to have
Must
it
call that
represented.
number.
Yes.
Okay. And any Pride Center within the neighborhoods?
They should be able to put them in contact as
Okay.
well.
Okay, give that number out again, would you? Please.
614-645.
Not seeing a lot of pens.
Yeah,
this down.
614-645-4610.
But hopefully that's one takeaway from today, that we get a few more of those Block Watches going in the community. Now we're talking about de-escalation. We talked about this as well, some violent situations. Any key that we haven't already talked about, de-escalation tactics or examples, personal examples of how you successfully de-escalated an interaction that we could benefit from? Susanna, I hear you shaking, I see you shaking your head.
I was in Linden in the New Harvest Cafe, and the owner was, I had been working with him or meeting with him, and his neighbor came in that he was having a conflict, and they started kind of shouting at each other, cussing at each other, and I did start, and sometimes I agree that having a softer tone does work. I use that often. Sometimes when it's really loud, I want to bring my voice to the same level of an intensity. Not that I'm angry or that I'm off the hook, but I'm letting them know that I'm here. So starting the conversation with them and listening to what each person, what's important to them. That is the most powerful for me, the de-escalation is letting someone know that I'm listening. And however you do that, people know when you're not listening and this isn't real. So whether it's your eyes, your tone of voice, your body language, getting into the heart of the matter. And there is skills you can develop to get to the heart of the matter. Sometimes someone's just talking and talking and talking, but there's a way to skillfully ask them questions, to let them know that you care, to get to what matters to them. Because once somebody has a sense that you know, that they know that you care, it seems to start dropping to a place where you can start to talk about solutions and resolution.
Great. So that was in a restaurant?
Yes, the New Harvest Cafe.
Okay, so with respect to environmental components, is there a tactic that's more impactful in a restaurant situation than there would be on the street, as it occurred to me on Sunday? Anybody? I mean, would my goal be to get them out of the restaurant and then to have a conversation outside, or is it best to de-escalate in that moment?
I mean, for me personally, if I were dispatched and there's a disturbance inside a restaurant, I try to get that person, hey, let's talk about this outside where we can talk privately. And then once you're outside, you can kind of de-escalate them a little bit further. And if you remove them from that situation, that kind of involves people chiming in and possibly escalating it even further.
Egging it on?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
If there's a conflict in the restaurant, a lot of times the people will feed off the energy of having an audience. So it is good to try to remove them from that situation.
Any street level tactics for us and how to do that effectively?
Well, one thing we train our officers is whenever there's two people in a dispute, we try to separate those people. And so if you're the person separating, it's always good to separate but not turn your back on the other person. if you have somebody there with you that's kind of on your side in this, kind of keep them in eye shot so that you can't be, you know, if somebody ends up going too far with it. So, but yeah, separate the two, you know, as easily as you can.
Good, thank you. What else?
I want to add to that, of course, a police officer is doing something different as a citizen. I think, again, the personal awareness, where you're at, are you in a place to make a difference? Certainly, I want to say in this situation, someone asked me, like, I want you to mediate this conflict. And I agree that if I'm on the street and someone's in a conflict or an altercation, I am thinking about my own personal safety and what I can contribute. Yeah.
Very good. Any other comments on tactics? Okay. So we talked about techniques in reducing violence in our communities. That can be everything from sitting on the front porch to creating a block watch to doing other types of community events. But what other things can we do digging deep into our daily lives to reduce community violence in our neighborhoods, I guess?
I think try to convince people to cooperate with the police when there's a crime that occurs.
Is that something you're not finding?
Yeah, quite often we don't get the cooperation if we're on a scene of a homicide, or witnesses don't come forward that we know have information. I'll tell you a quick story. I was working 88 wagon one night and got dispatched on a 911 hang-up call at 860 Greenfield Drive on the 3rd floor. Partner and I pulled up, we got out, we walked into the building, and there was gun smoke in the stairwell. You know the smell of gunpowder. We get up to the 3rd floor, we find the apartment. I go to open the door, and I have to shove the door pretty hard because there's a dead body on the other side of the door. I get inside, we start to search. I open up the closet that's right inside the door. There's another body inside the closet, and there's a 3rd dead body in the middle of the apartment. There was 29 rounds exchanged inside this 2-bedroom apartment, and you know how many calls we got? 1. 3 o'clock in the morning. Went door to door, nobody heard anything. Nobody heard any gunshots. We routinely ran into those type of situations where we know there were witnesses in the street who saw this happen and nobody wants to come forward. And it's very frustrating because I think if more crimes were solved and the people committing these crimes were incarcerated, the crimes would decrease.
Yeah, I think I'm just reckoning the community safety strategy piece, and that there's this, it's like building a house. You know, if the trust isn't there, then none of that is gonna. Right. You're right, it is certainly a challenge. What other comments?
For me, something I wanted to share earlier is I am out and about quite a bit in the Hilltop area, and one simple technique I do is when I see someone, when I walk by someone, I look them in the eye with warmth and kindness and say hello and how are you? So that can make such a difference for your neighbors, for your community. So that can go, a simple thing like that can go a long way. It de-arms people. Because when people are in that survival mode and they're just thinking about the next thing, for someone to offer that warmth and that kindness, it really makes a difference. As well as the second thing I just want to reaffirm is that building community partnerships in neighborhoods, for me, is the heart of the matter. And through a tremendous amount of training in trauma-informed care, that really you could go through so much science about trauma-informed care, but the essence is that if I go through a trauma, but I have someone that cares, know about that, understand about that, my resiliency, my healing happens so much faster. So this part about my organization, we can't do it alone. We don't think we have all the answers. But partnering with the Safe Routes to School, the Columbus Care Coalition, knowing that we're all in this together in our community, it changes the lens now that I'm looking through. Because now I'm building relationships versus only seeing what's very, the challenges, the difficulties, the violence.
Great.
I would say being involved with your neighborhood and being aware of your neighborhood. I'm not saying be all in everyone's business and, on next door, like, who's the new person that moved in next door? go say hi. Like, hi, how's it going? I'm Emerald. Nice to meet you, right? So I invite that, right? Get to know your neighbor. Your neighbor is your neighborhood. And remember that we all bring something with us every day, and it's our history and our baggage. And some people, some days, just aren't really going to say hello because they're just in that kind of mode right then and there, right? But it doesn't mean anything's wrong or bad about that person. But we are inherently different as people and as neighbors. But by being aware of one another and being aware of what's happening in one's neighborhood, when you hear from Block Watch and that there are burglaries because windows are being unlocked, right? Like, say hello. Like, don't forget to lock your windows today, right? Little random things that make your neighbors, a group of neighbors, a neighborhood, I would say is the one thing that you can do on a personal level to really help your neighbors against violence, is to just, be that neighbor you want others to be towards you, I guess, that good old-fashioned golden rule. Yeah.
Yeah.
I would say pay attention to your surroundings. We all have a tendency to be thinking about what we're doing next or what we're having for dinner, whatever. Pay attention to your surroundings. Trust your instincts. That is a very big thing. And when I spoke one place, so when I said that, this one woman said, "Oh, you are so right." She said, 2 weeks ago, I had to run to the pharmacy, which is down the street, to get my medicine. And I was only going to be gone about 10, 15 minutes. And I pulled out of my driveway, and there was a vehicle sitting there with a man in it that I didn't know. And I looked at him, and I thought, wow, that's strange. Now, she continued on. Instead of trusting that, if she would have pulled back in her driveway, she would have had much different circumstances, because she went on, she came back, and can anybody guess what happened? She was robbed. But when someone comes in to your house and takes something, they take more than your belongings. They take your sense of security. She said, "I can't sleep now because I just feel unsafe." So, and back to watching out for one another. I often say, if you have a Gladys Kravitz in your neighborhood, and those of you who remember Bewitched, she was the one that was always looking. That is a good thing, even though you don't like it, because she is paying attention to what's happening in the neighborhood.
Kind of to double on what Sergeant Cheatham was talking about, just increasing the trust between the community and the police department. We can't solve problems if we don't know they're there, and we don't live in these communities 24/7 like you do. I'm there for 8 hours, 5 days a week. So I don't know exactly which houses are the problems, which people are the problems, and if nobody tells us which houses and people are the problems, we can't begin to solve that problem. Like he talked about with witnesses, we had a gang-related drive-by shooting at a candlelight vigil. Over 100 people on the street. Guess how many people? We were there within 30 seconds. How many people told us what car did the drive-by? 0. Because they would rather handle it with a retaliation shooting the next night and deal with it on the street instead of having law enforcement catch that person and take them to jail. So that just continues that cycle of violence instead of, hey, trust the police department so that we can go out, get that person, and do the right thing and get them behind bars.
So again, the word trust, I'm just trying to figure out, we're doing something in Linden. The Police Explorers program is youth 14 to 18 years old, and they're trained, if I speak out of school, correct me, but they're given the same essential training the officers are on a much lower level. They get uniforms, badges, and they work events and stuff, but they're building good citizens. We're building good future officers, good future lawyers, doctors, business, it doesn't matter what we're building good citizens, and they're going to be ambassadors to go dig into the schools and the places of worship to kind of spread the good word, if you will. But what can we do about those 50 people? Is it all retaliatory? Is that why people aren't, or is it fear of repercussions? Is it?
I think it's kind of twofold. I think there's a historical fear of talking to the police and thinking that the police are the bad guys, and there's also the fear that has built up because the police officers haven't been empowered to make the difference because they don't get the information from the community, that the gang members will retaliate against people that talk to the police department. People are fearful of, hey, if they're even seen talking to a police officer or somebody in a white shirt, that they may be the target of a burglary or have their car shot up or their house windows busted the next night or right after the police officers leave. Yeah.
Huh, okay. Well, that's a tough gig, isn't it? That's a really tough nut to crack. So how can we most positively impact our neighbors against violence? Everybody want to start?
I thought we just answered that, I apologize.
That's all right. So this is,
That's what I
these were
answered.
very super similar. What things can we do tactically in our neighborhoods? These are some things we can do to impact our neighbors' experiences against violence. And it's just to bring them into this conversation, bring them to these lunch and learns, have them participate in building a block watch. It's like all this stuff, but it's then taking it from here, putting it in our repertoire, our tool bag, taking it back to our, I keep hitting that. I apologize, guys. With the earphones, you're probably hating me. But take it back and deliver it to our community so they can take it. Each person could be a little miniature ambassador for good. And I think that's what comes to mind when this question is in front of me, Emerald. I may have just answered it all of it.
Yeah, you nailed it. Nice job. Nice job.
Sweet.
Good job.
Cool.
Yeah.
We'll roll into the last part. Before I see people are starting to leave, I know we need to wrap this up. I wanted to thank the Department of Neighborhoods, Gail Gray, Allison Poirier, Commissioner Poirier. I think we have Rebecca Nelson, Commissioner Nelson. She left. And Hound Dogs Pizza for providing lunch before we wrap up. So I think if we could, do you want me to do that? I was good. Okay. All right. Before we share the panelists' information, let's open it up to the audience for questions. What questions do you guys have?
If you have questions, go ahead onto the microphone. And if no questions, we'll just move forward.
Going once. Here comes one. Why don't you come on up? You need to get for the mic so that Sherman can catch you.
No problem. Actually, I could probably talk loud enough without it, but I'll be happy using the mic. This isn't so much a question as an observation. You talked a lot about trust between neighborhoods and the police officers, but there's a bit of a problem here. Those of you who were here for the before session, the first part, the officer here, Sergeant, what's your name again? Cheatham talked a lot about how they're trained, if a guy has a gun, reaction time and things. From a practical standpoint, that makes sense. That combined with the court precedent you mentioned that said that officer doesn't have to know the intent of a suspect can sometimes result in a situation where, from a legal standpoint, there's sort of like, you go in the court and the police are up here and everyone else is down here. And the fact that everybody's got a cell phone now, I'm sorry, that's embarrassing. Let me kill that. Come on, sorry. And the thing is, because of cell phones, that's now on our news practically every night. I hate to say it, but I don't see the trust factor changing in a major way until that changes. Because honestly, there are some neighbors, I mean, I'm white. I can only imagine what the reaction of somebody who's an immigrant or is African American has to this news footage. I don't know how to change that. I don't see any way to change the trust problem unless something in that mess of things changes somehow.
Is there a question?
Well, no, I said it was more of an I guess, does anybody have a suggestion on how to change that? I guess it was a question.
Good insight. Thank you.
Yeah.
What I'd like to ask the question is, I've been on my civic association, North Central Area Commissioners, for the past 40 years, and I'd like to ask a question. How do we get officers and people involved from the panel? We had Officer Wilson. He was something like, he was a police liaison like the gentleman here was talking about. And we got to know him so good in the last 10 years before he retired. I'm hoping I can bring him back. But he knew our neighborhood like he lived in it. I mean, we partnership with him, and we got the neighbors to believe in the police department, and we got Brittany Hills a living place that we can live and enjoy now from a real bad place at one time. And I think I want to ask the panel, how do we blend men police relationships like we had with Officer Wilson? And how do neighborhoods believe in that? And how do we work together? Because we work very hard in bringing our neighborhood together to trust our officers, to walk with our officers. And we had a thing that if you ain't gonna speak about it and tell it, don't talk about it, because we gotta work together. The police cannot do it all. We live there every day. We know who come in our communities. We know who live there. And get to know your neighbors. I know it don't cost nothing to say hello. I don't care how you look or whatever. But we gotta get back to like the old school. You gotta know who live beside you, your churches and businesses and all. And that's what we try to do, and that's what we blended. And we had officers that, after they got to know us and believed in us, it just melted down our neighborhood to a place to live. And I'd just like to know, how do we get the committee here to bring police relationships, neighborhood relationships, and business relationships as a partnership, and with the neighbors helping at all angles?
Thank you. Thank you for your comments. Any responses to that gentleman's question?
I guess I'll go first. The police cruiser, the invention of the police cruiser and putting officers in police cruisers was fantastic. It increased response time. We can get to scenes quicker. We can get around and cover more areas of ground. But it took that officer walking down the street, off the street. We kind of swoop in, take care of that one problem, and then go to the next problem. Or, go get dinner, come back, take care of the next problem. So with the invention, we have walkie crews now. We have officers that ride bicycles, walk around these. At least in my precinct, we have the Safe Streets program, where we have 6 officers that are on bicycles, and they just ride through the Marion Village area, and they talk to the business owners, the homeowners. I always make it a point, even if I swoop in to take care of one problem, I'll take time, talk to some of the neighbors. Or if people are out, talk to them, see how their day's going, what's going on in the neighborhood. Is there anything I need to know?
Do you guys have a block watch? I'm just curious. Does your individual community have a block watch?
Yes.
You do. So who's your liaison officer?
Officer Zach.
Is he pretty engaged?
Yes, he's really engaged.
That's great. And that's helping in your community.
It's the community it's camaraderie that you have with her. She knows all us leaders by name, she knows neighbors by name. And once you create that, you got something going on real good.
Yeah, I was
We had
talking to
officers that even knew our bad people by name, knew who they were. And
So the good and the bad by name, right? Yeah. So she actually was at a community event, and she was off duty, and she played a whole game of chess with a group of young kids, because just like that kind of stuff, that makes the difference. And those kids have been touched by that, and will probably be super hard to erase that trust that was built in that just really short period of time.
Like National Night Out, officers got in the jumpies and they jumped with the kids. And they remember that police officer got in and played with me. And they were like, oh, they ain't bad people I call, know. It's just the old school, like when the police used to walk the beat, he knows the area versus driving through with a car. It makes a big difference.
Yeah. How many officers do we have per number of citizens? Do you know?
I know we have roughly 1,800 officers.
It's about 800,000 people?
Yes.
So it's like 2 per 1,000. Is that right? Is my math right? It's a lot. The ratio is pretty tough.
The same question you asked him. I don't know if there's a block watch in my area, but I live in a high-rise apartment building, so I'm a little insulated from that anyway.
So reach out to the liaison officer through the police website or through the number that JC gave us. And if you take that baton and run with it, you're my hero, because it's going to take people like you to get out there and actually effectuate this type of change. But I think that just boiling kind of down what we talked about today, it's all about trust. It's about our neighbors, about our people being respectful. I heard the golden rule. Everything we learned that we need to know, we learned in 3rd grade type of thing. Don't cut in line, don't cuss, don't hit, don't slap, don't. Those things, if we hold those things dear today, I think it'll bode well. I want to thank the panelists again for coming out today and your insight and your interactive value, and thank you guys as well. Thanks again to Hound Dogs Pizza, Department of Neighborhoods, and the commissioners that were here today. Thanks for coming, guys. Appreciate it. Thanks, sir.